Okay, we're live.
All right, I'll call this meeting to order of the City of Hood River Budget Committee. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from April 18th of 2021. Does anyone have any changes or corrections for the minutes? If there's none, then a motion to approve them would be good.
I'll move to approve the minutes of April 18th, 2021.
I'll second that.
And that would be April 28th, right, Kate?
28th.
Mayor moved to approve the meeting minutes from last meeting. Gary seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Minutes approved. Next up is general fund discussion. It's Rachel, you or Will leading that one?
I have a
Will's gonna, oh, go ahead.
quick
Nope, Will's
presentation.
gonna kick it off.
Quick presentation to kick it off on some sort of general fund wide things, and then we're going to go. Department directors will handle their own departments and have presentations for you. So I'm going to start off here with this one. And okay, is everyone seeing this? Just head nods. Okay. So tonight, the focus is on the general fund, usually where the focus is usually. This is the fund that houses all those basic governmental services that you think of when you think of the city, things that may have their own program revenues to some extent, but are largely dependent on general property tax revenue for their operations. So some of the things I'm going to hit on just real quick, and these also address some questions that came in between last meeting and this, is just kind of the concept of budgeted versus actually anticipated ending fund balance, and why you often see fund balance drop in the budget year that we're looking at. And then also interdepartmental charges. And I want to hit on how these are calculated, because they hit every single department, and the department directors really don't have control over them. So I wanted to just sort of briefly discuss how those are calculated and what's behind those. So this is from page 24 of your budget booklet, and it's the general fund summary. You'll see budgeted fund balance is set to drop by 17% from about 3.2 to 2.7 million. And that's really just the arithmetic of plus that bold line row for revenue minus the total requirements of the 9.8 gets you an ending fund balance. That's the math. That's just the simple math that creates an ending fund balance that's lower, but it's not necessarily what we expect. And you can kind of see that when you look back to last year's budget, where if you look at all the previous year's actuals, the ending fund balance matches up to the next year's beginning fund balance. But last year's budget doesn't correspond to what we're expecting for this year's beginning fund balance. Last year's budgeted ending fund balance was 1.7 million, and now we're really expecting to come in with 3.2. So why is that? To kind of illustrate it a bit more, I wanted to return back to what we looked at and sort of connect the dots with last meetings and general fund forecast. So this is the graph as you saw it last night. And then this is actually the budgeted fund balances from each one of those years. You can see actual fund balance, and even going forward, projected fund balances are always higher than what's in the budget. And this is obviously a perennial confusion, but it has to do with just what a local government budget is and how it tries to serve dual roles simultaneously. And I think this is particularly often causes confusion for people who come from the private sector, who don't have some of these budgeting issues that we have. But the two roles that it plays is, one, a financial plan, but two is a legal document authorizing expenditure. And so with the financial plan, you think forward into the future as what's the possible scenarios that can happen. I'm just conceptually saying, there's a high estimate, there's a low estimate of what may happen. And for revenues, we try to peg it right in the middle. We try to hit the bullseye. Where there's a 50% chance it'll be higher, there's a 50% chance it'll be lower. And really, we grade ourselves on how closely we actually got to it. But expenditures are a totally different category. And really, don't think of them as expenditures. They're really appropriations limits. They're authorizations for the departments to spend money. And you wouldn't want to set your appropriation limit or your ceiling at a level where you've got a 50% chance of being higher than it. You want to set it to what could we need to facilitate our operations reasonably and not exceed it. So there's just necessary that contradiction in terms that when you apply a simple arithmetic equation to it, you're going to have a different step. Even when fund balance is stable, it's going to, when you apply just the plus and minus arithmetic to it, you'll see fund balance goes down. So that's the reason for that is why the annual budget is just sort of one piece of the life cycle of our financial documents that we produce and how we monitor, why multi-year forecasting is so important to pair with the annual budget process, and also why we produce quarterly financial reports with year-end estimates. And one of the quarterly reports is going to be at the next meeting, and also why we true up our budget to the audited financial report when it comes out in December or January. It's in the city's policies that we review the audit and change our budget so that we align budget to actual beginning fund balances once the audit is known. Because right now we're just projecting what our beginning fund balance is going to be in July. There's still months left to account for. So any questions on why you'll see dropping budgeted ending fund balances? And this is in the general fund, but you'll really even see it this phenomenon much more pronounced in the public works funds that budget for large capital projects that may or may not stay exactly on schedule, but we want to facilitate them getting done as quickly as they potentially can. So that's why I wanted to hit on this. But any questions before I move on? I can't see the room, so unfortunately, you might just have to unmute yourself. Okay.
My only question, Will, is if you, when you go through this, you'd point out areas where the spread between forecasted and actual is different than has historically been the case. I understand where you're going with this, and I think if you just talk to us about if there's any unnatural movement or unnatural spread that you anticipate based on the quality of your forecasting going forward. If I trust that you know what you're doing here, but if there's anything weird, either in any of the specific departments or any other particular, inorganic risk that you point that out to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that, Rudy. And I really do want to maybe beat a dead horse on that. The budgeted end fund balance is in no way a forecast or a real expectation. My expectation for the ending fund balance is here on this multi-year forecast, and it's different than what you'll see as the budget, and that's why I show you this. And to your question about deltas and difference, you can see our actual usually comes in quite a bit higher than budgeted. The exception being 2021, with a once in 100 year pandemic, we'll do that. But you can see that delta for 22-23 kind of speaks to the level of how conservative I've been with the projections, and we'll probably do better than that. But absolutely, that gets into that constant monitoring piece as well, and how we continue to track and make sure that nothing unexpected or unusual is occurring. I'm sorry, did I understand your question and answer it, Rudy?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to move on to interdepartmental charges. So we've got, this is a screenshot of the police department budget, which is going to be the first one up tonight. And I just wanted to highlight what these line items are, and you're going to see them in every one of the operating departments. We've got vehicle maintenance and replacement, and then administrative overhead. And these are not anything that the department managers have control over. I calculate this ahead of time and just tell them what they're going to be charged. The vehicle maintenance you can think of as a all-in lease cost that is basically the full annual cost all in, like some manufacturers are offering nowadays, to use that vehicle for the year and make sure that it's always refreshed on schedule. So the replacement charge is what we expect the future vehicle to cost when we buy it, minus what we're going to get when we surplus the existing vehicle at the end of its useful life. And you can think of that as the trade-in value, but we send things to auction. I will note just real quick to give a kudos to Public Works. They just changed the auction mechanism that we use and went to a national platform that's getting us a lot better sale prices. And so I just want to, they definitely deserve a public kudos for that. That's over the long term going to reduce these vehicle charges. So we'll call that the net vehicle cost. And that's simply divided over the useful life of the vehicle, straight line. So that's the base vehicle charge. And then, but there's one additional aspect of this replacement charge that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. Instead of borrowing for a car the way that most people do, you go get a car loan and you pay interest on that car loan. We save in advance of buying the car. And so we earn interest. Instead of paying interest, we earn interest. So that interest on the fund, which is about $4.7 million in fund balance, that interest earnings gets applied against everyone's vehicle replacement charge and reduces it down. Now the maintenance charge, that's even simpler. It's just the city mechanics' total loaded cost plus their materials and supplies divided by the net vehicle cost over the net cost of all other vehicles being serviced. And just one little asterisk to add to that is that the fire engines are not included in this because they take a specially trained technician to do the fire engines, and any equipment like life packs or other just kind of large expensive things that we need to buy periodically that we use the vehicle fund, the fleet fund to save for and purchase, but aren't vehicles that get maintained by the mechanic, they don't get these charges either. So both of those together is the equipment charge that you see in the budget. And where so that's pretty simple formulas, but this is what it looks like sort of in the weeds. Administering it is a big long list of vehicles with all the relevant assumptions. And I meet with the department directors every year to go through line by line, each one of these, make sure the data is correct, make sure the assumptions of what we can replace it for is correct, what we're going to sell it for is correct, and how long it's going to last. And we'll add stretch years if at all possible. We don't turn in vehicles that have low mileage and are good to go just because the numbers in the spreadsheet tell us to. We'll add stretch years onto them as needed. And the major factors impacting the vehicle charge from the current fiscal year to next year's proposed budget is consolidation of the equipment maintenance and replacement charges. Those used to be separated, and so you'll see that there's just equipment maintenance goes to zero, and then there's a big jump in vehicle replacement maintenance fleet charges. And the reason for that is the prior practice, even prior to me, was for the city mechanic to literally track every single one of his hours and post a bill to the departments and track all expenditures that way. And then that would need to be accumulated by the office manager in Public Works, put into summarized reports that would go to finance, who would then draft up the journal entries. Then I would need to review it and post it in there. And so then basically the mechanic we had to every year calculate a shop rate, the same way that a private shop would, and departments get charged as if they went to a private shop. But the problem with that is they don't actually have the option to go to a private shop. So this is kind of market information that you can't make any market decisions based off of. There is no alternative. And it's a lot of administrative burden that really was not driving anyone's decision. So we're getting rid of that and not doing all that administrative work that doesn't really provide services to anyone, and just doing this more simple formula in this year's budget. Two, very low interest earnings. So we've dropped from 2.75% to 0.6%, which doesn't sound so big, but if you think it's an 80% reduction in the interest revenue into this fund, and it actually moves the needle, because citywide vehicle charges are in the $500,000 to $600,000 range across all departments. But when we're up getting almost 3% interest, we were earning nearly $100,000. So that's a big reduction on everyone's vehicle charge. And we just can't rely on getting the interest revenue anymore. Although on the plus side, we are using this fund because we know all of its purchases it's going to make. They're all pre-planned. We know how much cash it has and how much cash it will have. We're using this as a source of interdepartmental loans so that we don't need to go to banks. We don't need to pay bond counsel fees, bank fees, review loan documents, and then pay interest to an outside entity. We pay interest to ourselves by loaning ourselves money. So to some extent, lower interest earnings for this fund means cheaper borrowing for departments that need to borrow money. Third is whenever we choose to replace a vehicle with a higher cost vehicle, that's going to mean a higher equipment charge. And we'll see this most starkly in the police department, where we've decided to move everything over to hybrids. And those are about $15,000 more expensive than a conventional vehicle. But what you should see over time is the savings in fuel more than offset that increase in the vehicle charge. And also it's just in alignment with our city council and energy goals to be more energy efficient. And lastly, number 4 is that formula that took the net vehicle cost and just divided it by the useful life of the vehicle. That used to include the stretch years. So it'd be originally anticipated useful life plus stretch years would be the denominator, but realized thinking through it, they shouldn't continue to be charged after they've fully paid in through their useful life, and those stretch years should be free. And that also creates a good incentive for folks to continue to use their vehicles as much as possible. So what that does is kind of shifts the cost burden a little bit from folks who are really have well planned out and from the very beginning knew how long they were going to use their vehicles and needed to replace their vehicles right on schedule, versus those departments that are stretching them out. That kind of shifts the cost burden a little bit. So those are the major things we're driving differences from one year to the next. Any questions on vehicle maintenance replacement before I move on to administrative?
Hey, Will. This is Mark. Since we're not calculating shop rate anymore, and it makes sense just to get rid of the pain of having to refigure that out all the time and stuff, but it adds a risk that we don't know if we're still competitive with going outside. How are we going to do that assessment?
Yeah, we could do that periodically. We are so much less expensive than shop rate, though. And when I did a quick look, and just even in my personal experience, shop rates tend to be like anywhere from like $90 to $180 per hour. I don't know if anyone has any better information than that, but that's my own experience. Our mechanic, if you divide them out over his billable, is more like $76 an hour. So we are just way, way, way cheaper internally. And I don't expect that that's gonna change.
Cool. It seems smart to just have that check in there, but I agree that sounds good.
Yeah, and Counselor, maybe the Public Works Director can comment on this when we get to his fund, because they've recently looked at something like tires and figured out that it was much less expensive for us to take that on than to go to the shop rate. So agree with Will, it's something we should look at and are looking at. on a regular
Yeah,
basis.
yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, okay, getting into, anything else on vehicles before I move on to overhead?
Will, on the same vehicle maintenance, if we're not tracking hours, are we allocating like charges to departments based on the number of vehicles or?
Yep. Yeah, everyone's getting, go back. So it's just bigger, more expensive vehicles are getting a higher proportionate charge, and smaller, cheaper vehicles are getting less of a charge. So it's,
So the maintenance charge is based on the cost of the vehicle?
on the cost of the vehicle. Assuming that, they all have an equal chance to break down. We could do something based on mileage or something like that in the future. But again, we're not going to change the cost of the mechanic or his budget over time. It's pretty stable. So it's how much administrative effort do we want to put into that nth level of refinement when it's not changing the bottom line cost? That's the question. I mean, this is the.
I get that. I guess I'm wondering just between departments of like, let's say you're stretching a vehicle for 5 years, but it's in the shop every 3 months versus you just buy a new one, like are you getting charged? Is that department feeling that burden for you?
Yeah. So I'm all for market incentives. I love economics. I love playing with this stuff and thinking about it. But honestly, our police chief's thinking about arresting criminals. Our fire chief is out there trying to put out fires and run ambulance runs. I just don't think they're actually trying to game the system to that extent or think about it really at all, is my take.
Hey, Will, I want to congratulate you for simplifying the accounting of this and for making it easy on your internal customers to do things that matter. This is from my perspective, this is great. You should do more of this, across the whole budget spectrum. Count the things that matter and where you actually make decisions and allocate costs as necessary across, shared activities and shared expense centers. So I personally love this, being a kind of geek into this.
Oh, thanks. I love talking about it. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So administrative services gets even simpler to either credit or detriment. This is not a new, this is how it has always been, predating me and I think even my predecessor. So it's just how it has always been. And that's simply allocating the city management, finance, HR, information technology, and legal. And with the caveat, information technology expenses that can't be discreetly assigned. If a police officer, gets a new radio or something like that, that gets charged to the police department. But if we change a network server or switch and that helps the entire city, that's the type of stuff that ends up in the finance or in the administrative fund. And then that just gets broken out against all departments based on a 3-year average of their expenditures. And that's so that it doesn't jump wildly, particularly if Public Works funds had a large multi-million-dollar capital project that could swing their administrative charges wildly if we didn't do a 3-year average. But this keeps it moderately stable. And it's consistent, the administrative charges citywide have consistently been between 4% and 5% of total city expenditures for as long as I've been here and as long as I've seen budgets. So it stays pretty stable. And I think it's a workable, it's good enough. And so that's kind of how that works.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
on that last chart, it looks like you don't have something that says Public Works. You have it broken out by specific things that Public Works would work with, stormwater, water, sewer treatment plant, to
Yep.
refine it more, because we have money coming in from each of those buckets that we bill people. Okay,
Correct, yeah, every operating department, operating fund gets this. Things like the construction excise tax, money, or the reserve funds, they kind of just sit there and hold money. They don't get this charge. Just working operating department funds. Okay. So with that, I'll pass it over to the police chief unless there's any last questions.
Well, I've got just one question. Obviously, you have a lot of data. You have a lot of spreadsheets and various other forms of data. Where does that data reside?
Yeah, so we have our financial system, Cassell. When we've been building a specific budgeting module that Bill Bond created, and we continue to build and try to incorporate more things into it. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of these things in the budget live on spreadsheets. So personnel, budgeting for personnel, debt, insurance charges, vehicle replacement. There's probably a couple more, are all unfortunately Excel spreadsheet based right now, and we're trying to click those off and get them more hard coded in to various systems.
So what about backup and security for the files?
Well, they're on city systems that have backup routines and a lot of safety, run by our IT manager, overseen by our IT manager, and mostly operated by our contract managed service provider, Radcom. So we never had any issues with lost data, things like that. The budgeting it's good. It's important. I mean, it's my favorite thing. But really, the important stuff is the real money. The accounting of the actual expenditures, and that's 100% on our Cassell enterprise resource planning system.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Chief, do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to pop up I also have your presentation.
I can do it from here.
Okay.
One quick question, or not question, just observation when you were speaking. Councilor Zamler, you had talked about shop rates. Also is very important to look at with the municipality, a purchase of parts. We get a big break on parts for all vehicles and such. So we see probably close to a 40% savings, like on a transmission or something like that, when we do it ourselves. So it's much bigger than just the hourly rate that I see in the police department. Okay, let me know if you can see.
Not yet.
We there?
There we go.
Thank you. All right, let me get my arrows. Well, something just disappeared. All right, maybe I can do it manually. Sorry about that. So if you've got the screen. Well, I want to thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited. Every year, fresh budgets. It's been a unique year for us, as you know, with COVID. I'm pushing close to, I love to say almost 3 decades in a position in law enforcement. This has been a really unique year for us, something I've never experienced. I've been through the bird flu, swine flu in my job. So when I started looking at my presentation, I kind of wanted you to see the view of a police officer that works for us within the city, and kind of a view what we kind of did through the COVID and the day-to-day activities outside of normal spreadsheet or a pie chart. So it's probably Rachel rubbing off on me. It's kind of picturesque, it's to bring questions. So let me go through it, and I'll kind of just set up what's going on and occurring here. So let me know if you get it. So this year, usually every year we average between 25 to 40 plus community activities. So the start of the year, as with the COVID before it started, we started doing our activities within the community. And this was just a quick snapshot of what we do. The bottom one's the new May Street School. Every year we've done a citizenship award through them where they get to, the school itself picks young students and they get to actually eat lunch with us. And it's kind of fun. We take them out and show them the police car. And so that was early on the COVID. Up in upper left was the Safe Space, the Child Advocacy Center. We partnered with them for the month of child advocacy. And the upper right one was kind of cool. And that's Officer Delancey. We got a lot of newspaper shot on that one. This gentleman was struggling to get across the street, and due to probably some elements and some other things, he helped him across. And we saw so much response from the public to see that occurring. It was pretty exciting. So I wanted to point that in there, what we do. And then we kind of approached the COVID season. It kind of showed what we still wanted to be involved with the community, but how do we do it? This young lady to the left with the red hat, amazing story. You look at the Britton Strong group. If you ever have an opportunity, look at her Facebook page. She's a young lady in the red hat. She had the opportunity to go to Disneyland, and because it was closed for COVID, she asked her mother, can we travel around and bring hearts to 23 states just to say we love people? They traveled over 3,000 miles. It's a pretty cool story this young lady did in the experience. So something pretty cool. And then to the right, there was a local play group that came, and we let them go through the police department, and then they love to go through the police car. This one was unique. This one, kudos to the local school district. They contacted us, asked us to do a movie. So it was two different schools that did this. We had officers do a movie through the police department, kind of showing our day-to-day activities. They brought that movie back and they actually played it to them. And then a week later, the teachers allows us to zoom in as the group, and it was a Q&A. So it was something we would normally go to the classroom, but with the technology nowadays, we were allowed to do that. Quite fun. We had a good time. It was, I don't know if you recognize anybody there, but it was fun. I think it was near Halloween. There's definitely some unique costumes there. And this year was unique as far as criminals and arresting. Due to COVID, we're still very strict into that. We actually arrest and incarcerate into Norco very few people now. They have to meet a certain Measure 11 or person-to-person crime. So this year, we had a lot of crimes that we would normally take to jail, but due to the COVID and the sheriff's restraints, they were given a citation, like a traffic ticket of some sort, same exact piece of paper, and then they were told to appear in court. So this year, we actually, during traffic stops and such, we actually seized 53 firearms this year due to criminal activity. These were just the firearms. We do knives, forged instruments. Just a couple of days ago, we get brass knuckles and such. But I just wanted to kind of introduce the things that the officers are actually seeing there out on the field throughout the year. And then again, these are some drug arrests. These are activities that are 99% of these are just your standard traffic stop. We don't have a drug team. We don't do thorough investigations because we don't have the manpower. So these are a lot of times are just standard traffic stops where the officer contacts the driver and looks beyond the reason for the traffic stops and is alerted to something other than just the standard traffic stop. So quite large amounts of crystal meth, cocaine, and such there. See an AR assault rifle in the upper area. The 171 numbers, just a quick note, will go down this next year due to Measure 110. That's a new legislative law that's been voted in by the people that now with less than an ounce of drugs on your person, it'll now be just a violation, and they'll have the opportunity to do an assessment in lieu of paying the fee. So, and this one was a different one. This was the blue pills. You've heard of fentanyl. This is one reason I would love to have that new police department due to the air exchange and the ventilation. These blue pills were a mix between Oxycontin and a fentanyl mix when we got them tested. This was at a one traffic stop. Both sides, you can see to the right, there was methamphetamine in the one left picture, and then the black stuff would be considered heroin. I don't know if anybody's familiar with, but they would, a lot of times they would call it tar heroin or black heroin and such. Again, just a standard traffic stop. And this one was in regards to theft. You know, we had 132 theft charges this year for the 2019. We had several of these identity thefts this year. This one was probably the largest one of this year that actually went federal. This ring of people were stealing from Vancouver into Camas, into Washougal, and then also went into Hood River and actually within our community. Again, this was a normal traffic stop. The officer noticed the mail to the bottom right, that was substantial amount of mail in the back seat with different addresses and name of the licensed driver. Acquiring about that, we actually went to the point where these were people arrested. Got consent to go to the Hampton, and they actually had a big printer machine, the blank cards for the driver's license and credit card stamper, and they were using people's identification to make fake ID under their picture and then create charges on these fake credit cards they were producing. And lastly, this was the national push as far as, you know, several months ago, we were looking at use of force in law enforcement. And also they had the 8 can't wait. It was the 8 items that to make sure that local law enforcement were meeting. The council, we looked into the Obama pledge, which we could create it to, then it became the mayor pledge. But now it's, we chose to use the council pledge, which that had our insurance company, 3 council members, and a legal team for our city county insurance. And we reviewed policies that were really narrative as 8 policies that need to be reviewed to make sure we were meeting the national norm. And so we reviewed those and went over those. So, and then to the right was also our use of force. That was an evening presentation we did for council this last year. So that's what I have to share. Do you have any questions on that?
Chief,
I've got one.
Gladys, I do have a question. Thank you for that presentation. I appreciate your time and effort that went into creating that. When you were showing us pictures of the drugs being confiscated and the weapons, I see carpet. So I imagine that it's being like done in the main lobby of the police department. Is that correct?
Well, yes, in the squad room. There's in the back, there's a squad room where they write reports. And yeah, that's where a large amount of evidence like that, that's the only floor space, I would say, to be able to do that stuff.
Okay.
Chief, this is Gary Reed. I had a question about 2018 and 19. Was that a just statistical error, or what's the abnormality and why those years were so high?
Is in regards to use of force?
Yeah.
So yeah, when we went through those for the council presentation, what happens is there are incidents, but what happens is multiple officers on one scene and then multiple types of use of force being used. So we could go to 3 officers are responding to say a fight at the Golden Rose, which, you know, I use that, but that does happen there. They might come in and attempt to escort maybe a suspect or an individual out. And we consider that use of force if someone chooses not to go on their own means just by saying you need to leave the building. That could be grabbing an elbow, wrist, and then we call that an escort hold and say, hey, you need to go outside. That incident could escalate from someone pulling away to where we might have to do an arm bar, or we might have to do something more than that. So one incident could have several types of use of force at one incident, and that compounds with multiple officers responding. We could have, because each one will do a use of force report.
Gotcha. Thank you for the explanation.
Will, I don't have the presentation for the numbers or the budget numbers themselves. So if you have questions about that, I'd be glad to answer.
I can pop that up on my screen too if anyone needs it.
So I have a question, Chief Olszewski.
Yes.
And well, so we had talked about the potential to rent an interim space for some of these activities. Is that actually budgeted this year?
The simple answer is no.
No.
Talk about why? I can't see you when I'm sharing my screen.
Is that a question for Milo?
Will, why don't you unless anybody needs you to share the screen, why don't you not share the screen so that we can just have the conversation? There we go.
If that was for me, could you could you clarify a little bit on space needs?
Well, for instance, some place to interrogate people in private, drug storage, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, as far as interrogating people in private, right now we're just trying to make do. It's tough to rent or lease just a space for just those simple. I'm not saying simple, but it's kind of a one unique knockoff, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I don't know how we could utilize a space for just individual items where we kind of need to be combined as a department or resources therein. So.
Well, I guess let me ask a follow-up question then. For the new facility, how would you anticipate that what type of space would you need to process the drugs?
We went to a lot of great state-of-the-art facilities in Gresham and Canby and such and Sandy. What we need is, number one, is space.
Mhm.
We need enough space where we can put this substance or guns in the area and actually process it outside just the normal. Where we're doing it now, it's we call it the squad room. It's where you write, some of you have been here, write reports. Sometimes due to our space, we have to bring people back there to actually interview them if they're not maybe a violent suspect, or it's maybe a victim of maybe a forgery or something. It's just a nice place to be and not in the laundry room on the red couch. And then it's the up-to-date ventilation system where we are using these or having to test these drugs. The district attorney requires, it's called field testing. It's not laboratory testing. That only goes if the crime goes to a trial, because it's quite expensive, and the state assists with that at the state crime lab there in Clackamas area. So, and then the technology as far as just securing this stuff, the process, I know Mayor McBride went, but you lock it into a locking facility where it goes there and it can be obtained from the backside, where now we have things that work and they meet our needs. Are they best practices? Are they secure? I'm just going to say they work, but it's definitely not optimal for what we should be doing as our community grows and really our workload grows. We've increased our calls for service about 60% since I started as chief of police 9 years ago when I did the use of force report. So substantially more activity going on.
So you had mentioned, made a comment that you had wished that you had a different place for like processing the fentanyl, OxyContin thing. Were they giving off fumes or something? Is that
what happens is dust. And we're processing some of that stuff where the same people eat their lunch. Or kids come in, a lot of dads and moms here. So it's problematic. They would be like using your knife to scrape something off to test it, and then using that knife to cut a piece of cheese. It's a good analogy. Just kind of like the same thing. Yeah,
but it seems like the safety concerns like that should be addressed sooner than later. Because it's one thing to have an inconvenience. It's another thing to actually put people in harm's way by affecting their health, potentially affecting their health. So I don't know. I'm just kind of mentioning that. So in the future, we can consider unique, innovative solutions to that particular issue, because it does seem like a matter of safety.
I totally agree. I totally agree. You know, to make an evidence room that's state of the art, best practice, it's space and it's substantial cost, and it needs to be close proximity to the department because it is secure risk, you know, as far as someone breaking in. So those are the things we look at. It's close proximity, can't be in two different places. We're not big enough to where some guy could be somewhere else and then still have to shag a call or something like that, because we're still required to take calls even while we're processing. We don't have enough officers to put them out of service long enough to, you know, sit and do a report.
So this isn't really for this meeting budget wise. But I would just say that the tour that Megan, Counselor Saunders and I did with the chief and Don Chalet was so educational to what, you know, looking at what we have and looking at what you know, what is possible, that I would, in the future, it's not for this meeting, but in the future, I would just say that as many counselors as possible should go on that kind of a tour to actually see what it looks like when you can have it done, you know, from scratch. So just for future meeting.
So is it possible to scope potential location for that well? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, where we're at right now is direction from council as I understand it is we're going to have a discussion with the county about a joint facility and exhaust that option first before we revisit a city-only facility. And unfortunately, just haven't been able to move on that. Personally, the chief and I have just been really busy. That takes a lot of coordination with another governmental entity, but we hope to get back on that very soon in late June or July.
No, I understand that. I'm talking more like in the interim between, because that could be a ways out, you know, especially for these safety related issues.
Yeah, unfortunately, if I to still, and chief, correct me if I say anything wrong here, it is a specialized facility that you can't put into a commercial retail situation. Like look, you know, just get a commercial broker and see what buildings are out there. It really is like a hospital or a fire station. It's a very technical type building use with very specific needs that needs to be built from the ground up, unfortunately. Or
And this need has been identified by city councils for many, many years.
going back to the 90s, actually, yeah.
Mhm.
I totally understand that, but you know, perhaps there is something that can be done in the interim. People deal with dangerous chemicals all the time, and it usually requires a hood and ventilation, you know, which are not cheap, but still people do it.
I don't want to be argumentative, but I would add to that, you know, that they don't, maybe in a commercial, like in a brewery or something like that, not in a place that needs to maintain chain of custody sufficient to build a court case. And also not being immediately available to respond to an emergency call.
And we do have some unique, there are some unique attributes of our building because it is so old and historic that prevent us from really being able to upgrade it in the way that we might. I mean, that is one of the options that's been looked at. And given that it's, you know, given the state of the building is just prohibitively expensive to work with.
Totally understandable, but again, and not to be argumentative, you know, I think we should do, you know, obviously building a new facility is going to take some time. And in between now and when that happens, if there's health considerations that are happening for our employees, then we should do our best to look at options.
Please know, everybody on this call, there is not a single day that goes by that the health and welfare and safety of our employees is not my number one concern.
Thank you.
Councilor Mehta, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I guess I actually have like just a number question. But I will say that what I heard Chief Holsey saying was that like the fentanyl was not ideal, but that they had handled it in a way that it was not necessarily an immediate like health risk. Is that?
We do the best we can do for what we have. I'm going to say,
Okay.
you know, without having the ideal location, ideal evidence room, processing room. Again, we do the best we can do for this, what we've been given here. And I think we do a darn good job for what we have. But again, it's the welfare and safety of our employees. Absolutely. I would never put any, I mean, these guys are all family. Even though they're my employees, you know, I would consider them family as long as I've been with them. And I would never let them put themselves in harm's way. But things happen, you know, just like Councilor Cunningham said, you know, there's that unknown possibility of dust or anything. So it's just, you hope for the best, make sure we're doing the right thing.
So I was just gonna say that my eyes tend to go to the things that look a lot different than the last couple of years. And the one I was just wondering about the telephone. It seems like a teeny tiny detail to ask about.
Well, I'm glad you didn't look at my waistline because it's changed too in the last year. It's COVID 30, right? Sorry about that. Yeah, that's a great thing to catch. You know, it substantially went up, but we're actually saving money for the city. That might look like it's my materials and service budget, but we pay a stipend to each employee for carrying a cell phone for the city, for city employment. So instead of putting that in the personnel section, we've pulled that out, and now I'm purchasing cell phones for patrol vehicles, and they'll be able to use that. And that saves us, I believe we're about over 1,000 the first year, even setting up the phones. And I'm getting a much better package as far as a contract for these phones. It's for law enforcement, for first responders, and it actually allows bandwidth and service where when we have some kind of an incident and all the lines are flooded, it's called FirstNet, and allows emergency services to have first priority. So we're even offering a much better service for our community with these phones.
That sounds great. Thank you.
I have a couple questions for you, Chief. I wanted to ask in regards to Councilor Cunahan's question, have the hospitals or any of the local clinics here in town, has there ever been a conversation with them around secured space specifically to process drugs? You know, they do have the facilities to support that. And so I'm just curious if any of those entities have ever been approached in the interim until we actually, you know, do get together with the county and talk about the potential of having a shared space. That was one question that I had. And then I have
Answering that one, no. Like Will stated, these cases tend to go to court, and it's really custody sensitive. So to have someone go to like a hospital, even utilize that and know that they're there, at least now we can describe in a report, and we can show chain of custody with all of our labels through our actual squad room into the evidence room. That's difficult. You really lose that integrity of evidence. Mm-hmm. And then the second part of that, I would say financially, and I don't know who's online here, but I have battled with Providence as far as the cost that we accrue just to take someone through that ER door. The way the system works now, and some of you that are first responders, criminals know now if they say they have an ailment, they raise their hand and say, you need to take me to the hospital because I ingested meth or I have a broken arm. As soon as we put those through the doors, because they're in custody with us, astronomical cost that it costs and burdens on the taxpayers. So I'm very sensitive about, and I'm not saying this sensitive about going through those doors because it's done nothing but cost the taxpayers to utilize a hospital for other reasons. So I haven't even ventured out because of that.
Okay. I wanted to ask about your trainings and meetings. And so I see that in the last couple of years, it's like 12,000 and then it bumped up to 18,000. Then it went back down to about 17,000. Can you help me understand? I would imagine with, everything going on in our times that there would be more money put into more trainings or specialized trainings just to ensure that we are within, compliance and whatnot moving forward. So can you help me understand what do these dollars, what does the training relate to these dollars?
Well, you've got training for all different types of things. Oregon requires all law enforcement to maintain certification. We just don't become certified and you just become a police officer and stay a police officer. We're mandated 84 hours of training minimum, I believe, every 3 years, on top of if you're in a supervisor role, you're mandated. I believe I've got 24 hours a year that I've got to meet minimum of that. So that in itself is a big hit on a small agency. I mean, I push training because I feel that the best trained individual and with the most up-to-date stuff is so important in our community. And I think any officer will tell you, I mean, if the training comes across my desk and I think it's applicable, I say, can we send anybody? But it's everything from CPR to mental health training to PIO, public information officers, to we have to keep our firearms instructors up to date. We send them for that. And on top of that, when you say training hours, it not only is the training for the class for the day to 3 days. Some of my leadership for Oregon Chiefs of Police is like 4 days long. It also accrues the cost of the hotel. That comes out of that same line item. So it's just not training hours, hour for hour. It's what wraps around when you do go to training as well. So.
So Neil, do I understand too that a bit of the training you'd see in the overtime budget for people backfilling for people that we're sending to training?
Correct.
Training line item.
And I think I really want to echo, like you said, Will, a while back about the parking budget and, the revenue coming in. Our size of department can only squeeze so many hours for people to leave our agency. And, that right now it's pretty stagnant. That's about what we can spend because it's, as we send one person away, we have to either backfill or people don't get vacation or time off. So, and that's the other part of it is with, holidays and vacation, it gets tough.
I lied. I had one more question and it was around the public education. I see that in the past years, there hasn't in 2018, 2019, there was nothing associated to that. But in the last year, there's $526. What are those $526 for?
Again, yeah, we didn't have that in the past. So I tried to do a small line item. So those every year up until this last year, we've always participated in like the community Easter egg hunt. We actually purchased some candy. What we can't get donated, I try to get coloring books such that kind of break that ice and get comfortable with kids. And, you give them a piece of candy, you're their best friend, or we've gotten apples and pears from local orchardists that we know. A couple of years ago, we got T-shirts that the citizenship program at May Street School, we had those, the printer printed them for us for free, but we actually had to purchase the actual shirt. So stuff like that.
That's actually really exciting to hear. And it would be nice to continue to do more of that piece. Establishing trust with our community members is crucial. And, as you mentioned, giving them a little goodie bag of something, it really does help start establishing that trust.
I agree. Yeah, it's been a little tough with COVID. We kept going and then all of a sudden we've just flattened off and it's difficult times right now.
I just had a quick question, and this is probably for Will. Vehicle replacement charges jumped 90 grand. Is that new vehicle related charges or?
Yeah, that's why I used police as their screen grab. They're really good, and all those 4 things that are affecting, they all dogpiled on the police department. One, Neil sets a plan and he sticks to it. So that change of the stretch years, not charging for stretch years, meant that there was a bit of a readjustment there, and that moved to hybrids. They don't make an electric heavy duty truck yet. We're hoping in the next few years we'll be able to start transitioning more public works vehicles and things like that. But we are able to, and we're having, Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, we're having great experience with the hybrid police interceptors. And I'm seeing it, personally, I'm seeing it in their fuel budget as well. We're saving a lot of money on fuel. So I think that offsets quite a bit that bump up in expenditure. But the hybrids are more expensive, upfront. But you save it over the long term.
Okay, hopefully we can use savings to allocate to the other programs like candy and things. Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh,
I do. Yeah. What is your, hold on, I just lost it. Wait. Professional services. What does that include?
professional services.
Right below in custody medical expenses.
Professional services, let me pull out, I have a personal Excel budget that I use in-house just to keep, I like to challenge Will and keep him T's and I's crossed. So let me give you exactly what would come out of a professional service real quick here. If you give me just 1 minute here, I'll give you a snapshot of what we're doing out of professional services. So professional services, we've got stuff like psychological evaluations. Every time we hire someone, that there is a reserve volunteer as such, we send them out and they have to take a psychological evaluation. Those are quite expensive. When I say quite expensive, under $1,000, but it costs. So occupational medical. So people have to do physicals for our job. So that also will do that. So that's looks like the budget here that I have in my hand. That's pretty much the standard right now, is that kind of stuff.
Neil, I know your favorite one is contributing towards the dog catcher. I'm not.
Is that one in that one too, Will?
Yeah.
Or is that contract services, I believe?
That's contract services.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to ask. How does professional services differ from contract services?
Well, the Will can give you the definition. Mine, as far as I'm not a numbers geek, I look at it as contract services, something we're getting a service for the money we pay, just like animal control. We pay the county a substantial amount of money to get some service from them. Where the other one is, it's a service, but it's not it's like a one-time, it's not a contractual continuous service, if that makes sense. I guess it would be a business of the day.
So contract services wouldn't include any sort of service that we like a behavioral health need for anyone detained. It would be potentially in-house, right?
For contract services?
Yeah. And then professional service would be paying a behavioral health consultant. Is that what I heard you say?
Well, yeah, when I say behavioral health service would be like an evaluation, a psychological evaluation on a new hire. Yes.
A new hire. Okay.
Not on an individual or a custody. This is
That's what I was
employees. Okay.
Employees or community members.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then like contract service, the good one, like Councilor Meta stated, was our cell phone. It's a contracted service that I'm contracting, like your cell phone, but I'm getting a substantial amount of cell phones. That would be a contract service for AT&T or Verizon, whoever you choose to use. Will, did I define that okay?
That's as good as we're going to get. They're very similar.
Yeah, exactly.
They're used differently by different departments.
Yeah.
The Venn diagram overlaps quite a bit.
Thank you for your service, Chief, in a really difficult year. We really appreciate it. I don't have any more questions. It seems like a fairly flat year for you from a budget standpoint, which reflects, where general direction of activities. So I appreciate all of your support and explanation.
Thank you, Rudy. I appreciate that.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we can move on to the fire chief.
Leonard, you're muted, Leonard. You got to start over, Leonard.
Okay. Apologize. All right, good evening, everyone. I probably won't do as good as Neil. Hopefully, can everyone see the screen I'm sharing? Okay, thank you very much. So services. So Hood River Fire and EMS provides both fire and EMS services to the city, as well as we provide EMS services to 145 square miles in both Hood River and Wasco County. So up to Odell and then through the town of Mosier. So you can think of it that way. In 2020, we responded to just about 1,700 incidents. And you can see by the breakout, almost 80% of our calls are medical related, and nearly 20% or just over that is fire related. Some outcomes of last year, things that we have been working on are utilizing our GIS system, thanks to Jonathan. This has really helped us improve our response and recovery. It helps us target certain hazards as well as develop pre-incident plans. Additionally, COVID. When COVID started, we started with developing response protocols and helping with Dr. Benzinger, our physician supervisor, and the rest of the county EMS providers, solid protocols to follow for suspected people with COVID, as well as working with our Hood River County 911 system to improve information gathering so we know what we're walking into. And also during this year, if you remember a few years back, we started a Fema Grant system, applied for an AFG grant, was awarded it. It was nearly $600,000 to replace our aging air packs for the entire county. I authored that FEMA grant, managed the FEMA grant, and during COVID, we distributed these air packs, collected payment, and that saved the taxpayers of Hood River County almost $600,000 total. So that was a huge win for the county. Like Chief Holste, we participated in school Zoom calls. So we provided, I wish I had pictures of it actually, I will say creative outlets for various teachers through the West Side and Main Street schools, as well as providing station tours on YouTube. So that was an interesting response to a pandemic that we definitely didn't think we'd be doing. So speaking of COVID-19, we had the first cases in Hood River County in March of 2020. And then during last year, we had two significant spikes. Some in July, and it's this little small bump compared to our total call volume, as well as in December. And to date, as of today, we've taken care of 118 patients that were COVID positive. And that does not include COVID or suspected COVID as well. So like we discovered with toilet paper, our PPE was a challenge to obtain as inventory dwindled, especially across the nation and locally. But in true community fashion, the public stepped up to assist, from Gorge Sewn to create the masks, that's what you see on the picture on the left, to Maui Myers and his group creating the gowns, from Tyvek building material, and SailWorks produced those face shields that you see with 3D printers. So the community stepped up to protect your firefighters. So these efforts were invaluable to the staff here in the station, as well as to the county. And their work really helped us bridge that gap until we got the major supply chain back up and running. So in November, so just about, I guess, 6-7 months ago, Hood River County EOC, with Barbear's help, did a grant, and Hood River Fire received 3 of these PAPRs. That's what you see these two gentlemen wearing. They are powered air purifying respirators, and we wear these on all suspected COVID patients. And this is a huge deal. And I will note the timeline is in November. So a month before our biggest spike in December, we received this critical piece of safety equipment. Also in December, the members of Hood River Fire, as well as Hood River County, were lucky to get shots as the first group of being 1A. And it came at the perfect time, right when we were getting our largest surge in the county. So council work plan. One of the goals being equitable and an inclusive community. I just wanted to touch this with the council and the budget committee. We are working on community health as well as a behavioral health partnership with the entities that you see on your screen. The big change for us though is we're working, and tomorrow at a county fire chiefs meeting, we're going to finalize our contract, but we're changing our reporting software. And this reporting software will be able to talk with Epic, which is the major hospital language. And in turn, we'll be able to track things a little bit better. And those that are in charge of helping our most vulnerable population will be able to know our activity, as well as we'll be able to identify places where we can partner and share this information, especially to improve delivery of services. So with that, do you guys have any questions?
Chief, this is Mark. You've been spending the last few years getting the EMS thing all centered up, and I see the revenue looks really good. Can you talk just a little bit about whether it's, you know, fully self-supporting, which is the goal, or are we still working in that direction?
I will let Will answer the self-supporting question because I think that would be a better answer for him to pull up. But I will say several things. From starting here, we've done more interfacility transfers. With that was the approval of you guys saying we could have more staffing. Right. So I will say that's become kind of a runaway train, part of it this year, being super high because of COVID and a bunch of other things. But we are a majority player in that space, but it's also putting a pinch on some staff. But we average one of those a day. So that workload is high at times, but that's an average. But some days we'll get 3, some days we may get none, but one a day for sure. And that's definitely helped. 2, we improved our billing company. So that reduced fees by quite a bit. Just with our normal call volume, that was almost $40,000 of increased revenue, almost to like what Neil was talking about and looking for efficiencies in different contracts. That was one for sure. And the third one, which Will can talk to specific numbers, is Oregon 2 years ago started GEMT, which is Ground Emergency Medical Transport. Gary Reed's, I know, very familiar with that term. And that's allowed us to get the bridge gap from Medicaid, Medicare for when we transport people, and we charge a fair amount of money, but Medicaid only pays us $350. And so every one of those, whether it's an interfacility transfer to Portland or a ride to the local hospital here, it's $350. And so that barely covers costs of materials as well as depreciation of a vehicle and salaries and all those things. And a federal government reimbursement program, I'll just say roughly gives us nearly $50,000 a year. And then next month, or I should say, sorry, at the end of this month, the state of Oregon is having a meeting at the state level about a different reimbursement model, which is a CCO model. And I know I've shared some numbers with Will and Rachel, and we'll see where that goes, and that will make things even different moving forward as far as in the positive, I should say. So I hope I answered that question for you, Mark.
That's
We're
cool.
doing a good job, much, I'll say better than it probably was for sure. And I hope it illustrates the good work that these men and women here are doing.
I think council was fully supportive of you growing that with that goal, and I'm just happy to see you still smiling about it, and that it's good. So.
And I would add, thanks to the chief's leadership, we are going to look at our EMS system in this next year, because while it is one whole system, EMS is the majority of what we do, and fire suppression. Well, it is in a whole system. There are issues that are specific to Hood River. So the proximity that we, to Portland, is one issue for all rural communities that takes our folks out of service for a really, really long time. And then the kind of the condition of mutual aid, I guess. So what else is happening throughout the county that may impact our ability to provide those services? So we do have some professional services identified, and that's something, kind of this continuous improvement model that we're going to be looking at specifically in the next year.
I've got a question. Thank you, Chief. You know, you as the police chief, you have a more or less a flat budget this year. You know, I worry. I live on the outskirts of town, and I worry a lot about our elevated wildfire danger and what it the danger it poses to residential communities. We're surrounded by fuel. How are you guys planning for and accounting for, and what's our strategy from a budget and just tactical standpoint about managing the elevated wildfire danger that we seem to be under? And every year I don't enjoy summer anymore. I'm worried about it. How do you think about that, and how does the money flow in this direction to reduce the risk to the community?
Thank you for that question, Rudy. Actually, it's perfect timing. The state level, I'll start high and I'll go down low to the local community. The state fire marshal's office has identified that. I think the fires that occurred last year in Clackamas County really illustrated, I'll say, some shortcomings, and we can talk about public safety power shutoff, which I know Councilor Saunders loves to talk about, but it really highlighted some inefficiencies both at the state level with communication and wildland urban interface planning, assets and fuel mitigation processes, that sort of thing. We should hear any moment about some people that were hired and specifically for these large areas at risk, which Hood River County, Wasco County is one of those identified areas. So there'll be a state concerted effort at that with focus on fuel mitigation and other aspects within the urban interface. Hood River County is overdue for a CWPP, so Community Wildfire Protection Plan. We're just a few years past due, but we've had some challenges, right, as a county, both with responding to different emergencies. So Bar Bears has been maxed. But I would look forward to that coming as well. So that comes with us flying over Hood River County, getting updated WUI risk maps, that sort of thing. And that still may be handled at the state level. I don't know that yet. Hood River specific to the city, that same map I'm talking about, we work hand in hand with the building official to improve both building code and building materials, roof coverings and fuel away from homes to make sure that those homes that are being built in that area aren't propagating that risk and making things worse. All of those things are happening. I know the planning director is also working on some things. It doesn't forego the risk. I think Eagle Creek woke this entire community up, and we can go into, I'll say, mass evacuation and how we go about that, notification systems. There's a lot of those things, but I will say the state is trying to have, where we have Everbridge locally, to have a state system to where Neil talked about, the police chief talked about FirstNet and how we have priority use of cellular stuff. It also goes in hand with those that are on different cell carriers, how they get notified. So they're trying to make things a seamless system so we don't have a patchwork where if you are from, let's say, Multnomah County visiting Hood River County and you're staying here and something happens, how do you get notified? There's those types of factors that come into play as well. But for the citizens, I will say that's first and foremost. I know the city manager and I have lots of conversations about this action and what's going on. Do I worry about development as we move west? To some extent, but I think we're doing a good job with addressing those risks. And I'll let Rachel talk a little bit about ODF if we want to get into that as well. But I will say relationships with our partners from the Forest Service on the federal side, as well as ODF on the local side, to the fire districts locally around us. We all are working on improving that process and notification, especially for the citizens that are living in those areas.
I'm happy to mention this, Leonard, and jump in if I use language that's not quite technical, but the state, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, right?
Or forestry. See?
So many agencies. They are actually reclassifying some of the properties within the city So those properties will pay an extra, very small assessment and get additional fire protection from the Department of Forestry, should there be a big wildland fire in our area. So that is coming. There will be public meetings about that. And Mayor, it looks like you were pointing to yourself as being one of those properties.
Yes, I was notified and we looked at it and it was, they said, oh, you might get a $50 a year charge or something. And I'm like, it's worth 4 times that much. If we could be protected, we live in the Indian Creek drainage right up to our house, and that's cheap insurance to pay, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Everyone
and those are the resources that the city does not have access to that we would need in the event of something large. They bring in the planes and drop the water, and that's just something that a city of our size would never have resource wise.
Yeah, and a few years ago when we had a fire out on West Cliff, it brought that to light with the cost of aerial apparatus and a spotter plane and a hand crews, and it was for several days. And if that was the case within the city, it would have been a different story. So there's a lot of those assets that are just outside the city. Sometimes it exists at the airport that would be at our ready for when or if this ever happens. So that's what that relationship we were referencing on working on.
And no, the fire chief did not request a helicopter in his budget or a plane.
But it is in the vehicle replacement. I'm kidding.
Thank you for that.
Councilor Mehta, and then I guess Gladys. Oh, and the mayor. I'm not sure who was first. I'll let you guys decide.
All right, I don't hear anything, so I'm just gonna go.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your presentation. So Chief Holste did a wonderful job of showing us how the officers engage with community members, from school children all the way up. How does the fire department do that? I see that you have a volunteer expenses and it's about $6,800. What are those dollars used for, and how do you establish trust how does the department establish trust with our community members, kiddos, all the way up to our elders?
Sure. I think I will say this. I know Neil does a way better job than I do capturing that in pictures. With the principal at May Street, with Kelly Beard, we have done luncheons. Crews have done that for several years, as well as the school walk, et cetera. Same with Westside Elementary, though that sits outside the city limits. We'll partner with Westside Fire District. That's one. We do a lot of visits at care facilities, fall risk reduction and those types of things. But I'll tell you, I'm really poor at taking those pictures. I'm busy with other things. And I know that I don't ask other people to take those pictures as much. And I've honestly have focused on other efforts. But to answer your question about the volunteer thing, and you probably remember at one time we had a robust volunteer association that did a bunch of those things. And we had people, including like yourself, that helped with citizen CPR, whether it be English and Spanish. Unfortunately, a lot of those programs have left when some people have left as well. And it's really hard to recruit volunteers to fill those special roles, especially when we're looking at bilingual services and that sort of thing. But back to the community, you talked about what else are we doing? I've been on Radio Chara several times. We do a lot of different, but obviously COVID, this last year, it's been really difficult for me to draw upon that. But similar stuff to what the police chief had talked about, Zoom calls, YouTube station tours, et cetera. But the volunteer line item specifically, we have a lot of EMS volunteers. That's changed in the last few years, really to help the workload of the staff doing those interfacility transfers that take 4 to 5 hours every time. And so those volunteers, they need to have the background check and physicals and that sort of thing done. And that's where that line item comes in.
And in our next newsletter, there will be an article about the volunteer program at the fire department, which is pretty unique and a great program. So look forward to that coming out. Thanks for your leadership on that, Chief.
I was gonna ask about the uniforms and the contract services line. I was guessing it's just time for some upgrades, but if you could talk about it.
Upgrades with the uniforms or the?
Yeah,
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking or how that line item is used. Is that what you're looking for?
No, I guess why is the uniform so much higher in the contract services?
This upcoming budget, we're going to be improving our wildland protective equipment. So our PPE for wildland. So from helmets to boots to all those other things. That's the big one there. Will might be able to help with the drill down further of that, but that's the big increase. That line item has gone up. Is specifically solely for wildland PPE and time for upgrade.
Yep, that's a one-time, not a structural purchase of a lot of wildland personal protective equipment for, fighting wildland fires.
And the contract services, that's what I was wanted to ask about too, was about $20,000 higher than last year. Is that something specific?
That is mainly because we switched when we had an EMS and fire budget. A lot of the contract services being pulled out of that as a monthly hit for our ambulance billing company. That's one. Same with professional services. There's not much difference other than what Neil had expressed as far as what is in it within a contract. We try to make it a contract service. One-time hit is try to be professional services, but there's definitely a blend between the two.
That the bump from year to year is the rural ambulance consultant to do the evaluation that we just mentioned earlier.
Otherwise known as GEMT, but that other one too as well.
Okay. And the fringe benefits we don't have that anymore.
Yes.
What is that, Will? What is that?
Thank you. I should have put that into the intro. This one other change, and I may have simplified some things in the budget, but sometimes there's usefulness to breaking things out a bit more. And so all departments, fringe benefits is all of these things. Now I'm actually breaking them out. And
okay.
Now you'll be able to see how PERS is changing versus health and dental and life versus those other things. And one other change we'll get more into on the third meeting when we talk about other funds is the update to the financial policies in 2020. We moved saving for compensated absences as we kind of had the very crude formula and we would transfer into a compensated absence reserve. And so that would show up as transfers. We hired the same folks who did our utility rate study. We hired them to create tailored payroll charges for each one of the bargaining groups and non-represented based on how quickly they accrue compensated absences that may need to be paid out in the future. And so we have payroll rates applied there that money will go into an internal service fund that will pay out compensated absence when folks leave employment versus it coming from the reserve fund. So that's what that's all about.
Great. Much more accurate, probably.
It is, yeah, because the bargaining groups have bargained much different compensated absence accruals. And so there is quite a bit of difference sometimes in the payroll charge, that the appropriate charge to that department to pay those out, that sort of hidden liability that's accruing.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys for the opportunity. It's been a wonderful year.
Okay, next up we have the planning department. So Dustin, you can share yours, or I can have yours too if you want me to share.
I'll share, Will. I got mine queued up.
Okay.
hopefully we see the standard header slide. Thank you all. Not all heroes wear capes. Some of us are planners. So after police and fire, we have to, we make our place here too. So, but thank you all and good evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dustin Nielsen. I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning. And I'm just going to provide a short overview of Planning Department and here to answer any questions that you may have. Broadly speaking, the Planning Department, our primary role is to administer the city's comp plan. And that really happens through the implementation of the zoning and land use ordinance. In 2020, we had 3 full-time staffers on staff, and now we figured we have about 68 years of professional experience between us, which I think we've crossed the threshold of experience to now. We feel vintage. So in 2021, there is another half-time equivalent, which is included, which will support some of our admin services, as well as provide some technical and administrative support for building. Planning really is one of the 3 pillars of the land development aspects of the city, along with the engineering and building. So we really serve oftentimes as the first stop for customers in the land development process, which oftentimes is the most discretionary, the most public facing, and oftentimes the most controversial. On the operational side of things, we are the primary city staff for a lot of the housing efforts. We administer the short-term rental licenses. We support urban renewal and technical planning. We execute commercial developments. We're responsible for economic opportunity analysis, parks planning, historic preservation, natural hazard mitigation, recycling hazardous waste, amongst others that seem to come our way. Looking back on 2020, we not only continued the current review and workload of application materials, we made significant progress in some of our longer range planning efforts, including the middle housing zoning code update. Right now we're wrapping, that's being wrapped. The transportation system plan, fee in lieu of parking regulations were revised in 2020. We executed some historic building conversion regulations that not only provided opportunities to reuse buildings, but also make an opportunity for affordable housing or housing opportunities within the commercial zones within the city. We were members of the performance improvement and process improvement process through the city, looking at our development codes and how we execute and work through active applications. We supported the development and approval of the parks master plan, implemented an expedited land division process, permitted the first 3 multifamily developments in the last 17 years. So this being done during the pandemic, a lot of these accomplishments really required some new approaches to collaboration and workflow with our other departments, agencies, and with citizens. And really we accomplished this by becoming mobile equipped. All the staff is pretty mobile at this point. And we remain networked through some tech investments available through the city. We relied on the online meeting platforms to carry out our public hearings, like Planning Commission, the Landmarks Review Board. We conducted at least 4 different surveys and outreach over the course of the year, all online. We established a nearly complete electronic submission process for application submittals, routing, work, and archivals. We set up a greater access to the public through the web and electronic devices with some generic group accounts rather than relying on person-to-person. We conducted our open houses through online surveys and rather than directed interviews. And we returned and are returning to some extent to the use of some consulting services to handle some overflow to reduce the amount of processing time. And as we, outside of that, we're really happy to support in some of the industry relief and response efforts when using the right of way for parklets, permitting outside and temporary uses. Really helped work on some of the curbside pickup in the industry meetings just to really be present with our partners as really they face some pretty dire circumstances this year. And, you know, that also allowed us to share some of these experience and this expertise with the group. Today, I was able to walk through with the group from Prosser, Washington. They were really looking at how we handled a lot of these issues. And it's great to be able to share that with the community of professionals and other communities that really look to us and, you know, look to our experience and successes over the last year. Looking forward into 2020, into the work plan, we'll continue working on the Heights Urban Renewal Project as phase 1 wraps up. This has been a lot of the stakeholder meetings, a lot of the background research, and we'll move into phase 2, which is going to really lean into the design and some of the regulatory reviews. We'll continue with this Cascade Avenue which is a project with ODOT, looking forward to the redevelopment of that street, as well as the onset or the advance of the historic Columbia River Highway State Trail or regional trail. We're going to end up with staff being committed to the housing code or the housing production strategy. Again, one of the major council goals continues and has been housing. We're starting to look at, and you've just recently scoped some of that project. We'll also continue to look at the zoning code, including not only landmarks regulations, but also the code itself, which has some serious impacts on how we process applications and how we review them and the relevancy and the effectiveness of these rules. So we need to look at the code not only for its own effectiveness, but how can we effectively improve our processes and improve the workflow for our customers, for the citizens, be responsive to state rules, and continue to function smoothly in a really changing landscape. So this is really both a regulatory process and an operational process update. And then we'll continue to work on Rand Road, 780 Rand Road, as the city's directed really housing project in itself. So that's really my overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you. Thank you all for taking the time and being here tonight.
So the only thing I had a question on is the professional services is up, and that is specifically for, can you go over that again, Dustin?
Yeah, we'll take professional services, and when we use subject matter area experts for housing, whether we reliance on economists, real estate experts, we will have some technical consulting help for that. We'll also rely on that most likely for, we're moving things around, for just really technical experts supporting our project managers. We'll use it also in some of the code audit as well.
So I'll chime in there and say some of the specific projects, and there is continuation of the housing, affordable housing production strategy. And let me pull up the other things that are specifically in there.
Is the Rand Road continuation on the Rand Road stuff there or no? No. Okay.
It is not.
We'll be done with that. Okay.
No, it's in the affordable housing reserve is where that activity occurs. So let me see.
I want to speak directly. Oh, sorry, Counselor.
What page is that line item on? Because I think my book might be missing a page.
43.
40, be between 42 and 43. It actually splits between contract services on 42 and professional services on 43.
So some of the things, specific things we have in there is $25,000 affordable housing production strategy, $12,000 for application form update and rebranding, basically getting our forms electronic. And the zoning code audit is $35,000. And then just generally a structural increase of $15,000 to professional services contract support, which is just to get additional sort of the horsepower to get development plans reviewed more quickly.
So is that only on the planning side and not on the building side, building department side?
Yeah, that's on the planning side. So all of these changes are consistent with our process improvement work. So you'll see that their FTE actually goes down, but that resource doesn't go away. It's allocated between planning and building so that there's one person who can answer questions for multiple divisions at the front of house. And then we put additional resources where they're needed most, which is on identifying areas to streamline our process, our land use process, and review applications.
That sounds great. I mean, hopefully it'll speed up the process for getting houses built. You know, the whole thing, the whole machine just being honed a lot better than it has been before. Great.
I'm missing that from my book, and so I don't have those line items. The last thing I see is page 37.
Sorry about that. We'll get you a new book, Counselor.
Please. Dustin, the question that I had was, I just didn't see, you know, we have a very aggressive plan around housing for this year, and do you have the appropriate staff or all the staff that's needed to continue the work that we have planned?
Yeah, I mean, we budgeted that. And I think, as mentioned, that contract and professional services, that also is very much instrumental in supporting that effort. Again, have a technical expert to really push on those projects is critical.
I also saw you talk about, there's a line item in here around printing services, and I only see that it was $100. Do you have your own internal communications team, or is that Paige that does all the communications for the city?
And that mostly those communications get rolled into some of that admin support. So I think that's part of my legal printing oversight is really a part of, and that would be on page 43, I believe. So that those type of services are rolled into there. A lot of my printing has to do with if I make flyers or something that's on the small scale.
That was what my question was about, was how, with all the information that has been given out, it has been Paige that's helped you, or has there been another entity that's helped with plain language information and like getting the surveys out?
A lot of that some will be Paige, and some will be part of the contracts that when we execute a professional service contract, typically that goes into those contracts. So for like the TSP, the transportation system plan, that was an aspect and a portion of the contract signed with DKS Associates. So we usually, when we are advertising special projects, usually they get assigned with the contract. So
Gotcha.
that rolls into that.
Okay.
But when it comes to something that's city initiated without attached contract or project, that's usually an in-house item.
An in-house item. So communications is something that our community members have asked, like, you know, continue to communicate with us, make sure that it's comprehensible, easy to understand. Would that fall under planning, or is that like in the general fund? Like, where would we put dollars towards like a plain language specialist, or really more bilingual BIPOC communication out to our community members?
I think I think that may show up in admin for communication FTE. Otherwise, we will rely on our general fund allocation for that. And we use that for, say, the next door or the similar items. Our partners go out of that line item.
Okay. Yeah, if I could just get a copy of just that one, Will, I would appreciate it. I don't have I don't have these 2 pages.
Strange, just the 2 planning pages.
Yeah, just the 2 planning pages. I think
Okay.
maybe Justin did it on purpose. I'm just kidding.
Okay, is there anything else for planning, or next we sort of have a breeze through some of the smaller departments?
I'd like to thank the city for being super responsive, with respect to all the business help after COVID last year. I know there's a lot going on with all the pickup zones and parklets, and it's hard to make everyone happy with these kind of things, especially quickly. But you guys really, stepped up to help. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rudy. It was definitely a lot of hands on deck, so we will pass that along to everybody who helped out. Thank you.
I have another question with what Rudy just brought up. As a council, we really supported the idea to just support more businesses to provide parklets. Is that something that was added into planning, that we could have some reserve funds available for businesses who would like to start a parklet but just can't financially do so?
That is not in the budget. We did apply to Travel Oregon, and I've applied for, I believe, $80,000 with the intent to give $8,000 to $10,000 grants to anyone who wants to upgrade or create a new parklet. Unfortunately, we heard back on Friday that we were not awarded that contract. So it's not off our radar, but no, it wasn't budgeted with like general tax dollars. Okay, I will then share my screen. No presentations for the next few. I just wanted to hit on all the general fund departments that aren't public works to give a chance for any questions. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'll start with, we'll start at the top with non-departmental. So this is where, and we really hit on this. I'm not going to go into the revenues too much because that was really the focus of our first meeting and our revenue outlook. But this is where all those non-program specific revenues, the general tax revenues that fund everybody in the general fund, accrues to non-departmental. And the expenditures are those sort of strategic projects that also can't be discretely assigned to a department. So for instance, the planning department has in their budget the affordable housing strategy work and improving their forms and things like that. Some of the things that we have in non-departmental is that citywide communication work, approximately about 70,000 for that. Restarting of the hydroelectric project. We have the city's portion of that will be here in the general fund, and the part that will be funded by Energy Trust matching funds is in the grant fund. That's $75,000 one-time hit to the general fund. Small dollar amount, but something I'm really excited for is $7,000 in this line item to work with the CAT bus. I think they're putting in about 10,000, and they were going to provide a certain amount of bus passes to downtown, anyone who works downtown. And working with them, we said, how much would we have to pay to just take off the cap so it's not so confusing, and just say, if you work downtown, you get a bus pass. And they said, well, if $7,000, we'll take that risk. So we're putting in $7,000 combined with CAT will mean everyone who works basically in the boundaries of the Columbia Cascade District. If you want a bus pass, you get one for free next year. $25,000 to help the CAT bus buy a trolley. So previously, before COVID, we were giving $25,000 a year just to lease a trolley year by year. And then that got cut going into COVID and didn't operate. Cat Bus has some operations funds available. So they said if we can give them $25,000 one more time, they will buy a trolley and operate it from here on out on their own. $50,000 for the equity and inclusion assessment contract work. There is just rolled over from previous years, continued support for the Hood River Warming Shelter, about $23,000. Continued support for our contribution towards the Hood River County Energy Plan work, $10,000. And those are sort of the discrete activities that are budgeted in here. And then I'd say there's also some non-assigned, not every single dollar in here is programmed. And this helps us when, you know, for instance, we have, you know, if depending on how this police facility work will do, you know, go on with the county, maybe there will be some need for some contract help there. There'll be room in here to cover that. Kind of projects that pop up through the year, make sure that we have the flexibility. So that's what 190 is about. Again, I can't see anyone, so just chime in and stop me at any point. But if there's nothing else, I'm going to move on to the City Council, page 44.
Well, I had a question. This is Jessica. On the revenue side, the state marijuana tax, that went down a lot. I'm guessing that's because something changed at the state level.
Measure 110, yes, and I'm going to hit on a bit more in municipal court as well. And the chief talked about that as well. Decriminalization of small amounts of drugs. It also redirected 75% of the state marijuana tax towards regional treatment centers that are going to take a few years to stand up, but they expect to have them in every region. So we should be served here.
And the line below that, what is that one?
Federal coronavirus relief reimbursement. That's where the federal monies are.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
So 795 in 21-22, if they stick to their schedule, money has not been received yet as of today, but we expect it. We assume the federal government is good on their word. And then another 795 in 22-23, or yes. Or sorry, back that up. 795 today, and then 795 in this new fiscal year 21-22. That's it.
Hey, excuse me, Will, this is Dave Bick. Hey, tell me a little bit more about the money being spent on a hydro project. That's a public-private partnership?
Yeah, sort of. It's so we spent, what did we spend? $35,000 to do a preliminary feasibility study with the hope that that would be good enough to make us competitive for some grants. So we got through some initial stages of feasibility. It was looking good. We went for some grants. We were unsuccessful. We got word back that we need to take this to a more fleshed out feasibility level. So really getting pre-approval for interconnection, getting harder construction quotes, really nailing down site control, getting to a higher level of design, things of that nature. And the Energy Trust of Oregon, which is a kind of public-private, they receive their money from ratepayer funds that charge on people's utility bills, on power bills. They have matching funds for this planning work. So we expect it's going to be a little over $100,000 to get to that next stage of feasibility. So we're going to put in, so that original $35,000 we put in was also matched by ETO, so $70,000 altogether. That was in the water fund because I felt like there's a good enough chance this was going to be a net positive return on investment that I thought that was appropriate to spend it in the water fund. I don't want to spend more ratepayer funds on if this is, I don't want to continue to give more and more ratepayer funds if we're not certain this is going to pay itself back. And really it's about city council goals, I think mostly of energy efficiency. So that's why it's general fund in this budget. But it is going to be matched by Energy Trust of Oregon. We're already totally squared away with that. And that's what the project is. Did I answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, I think so. I'm curious because I know there's been studies on the hydro potential of the city's water system going back at least 30 years that I'm aware of, and they have never penciled out. So I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, it only pencils with a lot of grant money.
Okay.
But more, yeah, it's not, you know, there's industrial scale renewable energy going on out there. Those are those huge solar farms, obviously the wind farms that we all drive past. This is not industrial scale. So the price per kilowatt is not your cheapest price per kilowatt by any means, but it's mechanical energy that's just flowing, and we're using PRVs to slow it down right now. Might as well collect some renewable energy, and if we can get it grant funded so that it's actually a okay investment to the city, you know, why not? But it really has to do with those grant funds.
All right.
Your point, David.
Thank you.
From the Energy Trust Council standpoint, you know, there's just a lot of opportunities right now with grants. And, you know, if you get first in line and you're ready to go and you have some match, we can take advantage of those things right now. You know, later on when everybody's asking, we won't have such an advantage. So we're trying to get on that bandwagon quickly.
Yeah, and you will see more of that when we start talking about public works, because, and I know that city councilors are receiving, you know, information about funds that are available. So Mayor, you're absolutely right. We are ramping up and we'll be putting, you know, trying to leverage as much of this funding as possible in support of the city.
Okay. So I'll move on to City Council. Page 44. One of our most gargantuan budgets is, you know, support we provide to our city councilors. Approximately $23,000 for $100 stipends, and then some work to give you some training if you have the opportunity, or to bring in facilitators. Nothing specifically programmed here. This is really work. Just be ready when needed, if there's trainings, things like that. Okay. And Municipal Court. So this is one that has really, I think, convergence of legislative changes plus COVID type operating environment is really going to reduce municipal court revenues, I think, going forward. You know, we're just not doing the same stops as we used to. You know, we haven't, you know, the direction from the DMV has been don't cite expired registrations. You know, a whole class of misdemeanors for drug offenses are now becoming violations. So that's kind of all things that we're working through with municipal court. But it's still a really, I think, great asset that we have here in the city to have that local touch and bring people in to talk to the municipal court judge. He does a really great job in helping folks, you know, think through what situation they're in and how to get out of it. So I think it's still a really, really valuable program for the city. Okay. I'll move over to parking on page 50. Parking revenues down and projected to continue to be down in 21-22. This is a pretty important revenue source for the city. We had hit pre-COVID what I called peak parking, kind of as long as the perimeter that we charge for parking and the rate that we charge for parking remains static. We basically hit our peak in 18-19 and the couple years prior, but still a lot of money. But it's been down, and where lodging taxes have bounced back, we're still lodging went down almost to zero, and now is back up to normal, or even a little bit of growth we've seen in the last few months. Parking revenues went down about 50%, and now they're still down around 25% from normal. So they're not bouncing back nearly as quickly. And what we do, not in this budget, but next meeting, when we talk urban renewal, a big parking a related issue is we have budgeted to replace all of the coin only stations to the multi-pay kiosks, which is great.
Did you say that's in this budget, Will?
Not in the city budget, but it will be an urban renewal, but it definitely affects, it definitely impacts this budget. Mhm.
Yeah, cool.
So that's all the kind of other program areas in the general fund that aren't public works.
Quick kudos to the city. I really like that passport system they've got for the parking meters now where you can use your cell phone. That was the best thing since sliced bread. Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a council work plan project. So a council priority, that parking study, and we're just slowly checking those off the list. Yeah.
Well done.
I'll give just a little bit more kudos to Laura in our office too. She really handled that and negotiated with each one. You know, Passport's one of them, but there's 3 vendors, and she got all of them on board and worked with them to make sure that some of them wanted to charge us higher fees. She brought them all down to match the lowest. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Are we going to continue with public works?
Yeah, maybe I'll bounce that question off to the chair and to the committee if we want to continue on to public works, which we had a regularly scheduled for 3rd meeting, or if you guys want to keep going, Mark's ready to go.
How are you guys all feeling?
I'd maybe love to not keep going.
Yeah.
I too.
As much as I want to hear from Mark.
I'm with the counselors. I'm ready to wait until next week.
I'm ready to wait. I can only take in so much, and I want to be fresh for Mark's presentation. I feel like I've had a lot tonight already.
You guys aren't amped up to go over budget numbers more? You guys. All right. Well, sounds like everybody's about good for tonight. So we can do public works next time. Sorry, Mark.
I move to adjourn.
I just do that. So if there's nothing else, then call this meeting to recess.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
So we meet next Wednesday at 6, and we'll do urban renewal first, and then continue on with city at 7 o'clock. Is that correct?
Correct. Thank you, Mayor, and you reminded me the annual thing we need to do is request 2 volunteers to sit on the Urban Renewal Budget Committee and start at 6 rather than 7.
But urban renewal is at 6 or not?
Urban renewal is at 6 and then city picks up at 7. But because we have 2 port commissioner members, the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee isn't big enough to fully round out the budget committee. We can have vacancies. We have vacancies on this. So if there's no one who wants to volunteer, that's fine. We can move forward
I
with
can
it.
sit in on it.
Grant. Okay, thank you, Grant.
I'll volunteer as well. I'm happy to do it.
Okay, thanks, Rudy. Okay, so we'll have a full budget committee for urban renewal. Great.
And thank you for getting all your questions in to us ahead of time. It really helps us provide, I think, some really good information at the beginning. So thanks again. If questions come up, don't hesitate to send them our way.
I just have one quick question. So because there was the little budget pieces at the end after Public Works, are we going to talk about that next week then?
Other funds, like all the grant fund and reserve funds?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Have a nice evening.
You too.
Good evening.